The McCuistion Program, talking about things that matter with people who care.
There is nobody here in this audience that can tell me that I don't have the right to protect myself and my family.
An intellectually stimulating, objective exchange of ideas that challenge prevailing attitudes.
Now, what's different today is the competitive pit is fiercer. It's even more unrelenting. It's even more unmerciful than it's ever been.
Educating viewers on social, political, economic, and business issues. Providing up-to-date information and perspective that presents divergent points of view.
Going to school, what did teachers complain about? They complained about chewing gum in class.
Brought to you by the Foundation for Responsible Television. We believe the power of television can significantly impact individual lives.
10 years ago, Dennis and Nikki McCuistion came to us with an idea. The idea was to produce responsible television programs that went beyond what we in TV call public affairs.
I asked these journalists their opinion of the #1 responsibility that journalists have today.
Oh, I think to find the truth, which is what that's always been the first responsibility or job of journalists, is to find the truth. I think also
the role of the journalist has always been in a democratic society is to provide information to the people so they can make informed decisions.
#1 job is to be accurate and to be fair.
Connect the dots to help people see the relationship between what's on the surface and what's under the surface.
I was able to get around the car somehow, and I was going to a neighbor's apartment. And as I turned over and looked past my right shoulder, I saw the gun come up. And he had grabbed the gun from underneath a blanket that was on the front seat of the truck. And somehow he shot me through this hand first. And I pulled the hand around and I said, "Oh, my God, I've been shot." And just as I got to my neighbor's apartment door, he shot me in the back of the head.
kids that we see have been children who have suffered, abuse at someone's hands earlier in life. They're running away from bad situations. They're on the street. They get involved with the wrong people, and they make poor choices.
The greatest educators and most important ones are the parents. 2/3 of a child's working vocabulary has been acquired by age 3, 80% of the character by age 5, and 90% of the personality by age 7. So those first years are extraordinarily important.
You're touching these kids, and we can talk about it all day long, but when you see lives impacted, when you see the smiles on these kids' faces, when you see the difference this makes, it's hard for anybody not to want to get.
The World Wide Web is best described as the universe of information which you can access using networks.
Bill Gates has really, he was never my favorite software guy because I'm an Apple person. He has become my favorite manager because literally about 11 months ago, he grabbed onto the importance of the internet, and he had disparaged it before, and almost on a dime, 1 minute excellence, he unhooked this giant 20,000 person company called Microsoft, which was essentially creating appliances for PCs, and turned them into an internet company. And he literally made people drop their files, erase their files, throw their work of a year's worth away, and head down another road.
I am a woman who ordinarily has a tremendous sense of humor unless I'm not feeling so hot. And I remember the night when all of my joints were aching, and so I put Ben Gay on the knees and the elbows, and I had a headache, and I put Vicks Vapor Rub on my head, and I tied a handkerchief around it real tight. Don't ask me why I do that. My mother did it, my grandmother did it, I do it. My feet are usually very cold, and I had on my husband's winter socks, and I had on my mangiest nightgown and the kind of robe that you would never wear in front of anybody except a husband. And so I went to bed. Yeah, let's face it. So I went to bed, and I'm like this, and a couple of hours later, I guess my husband wanted to know how I was feeling. And he walked into the room, and as he walked into the room, I could hear. And so he sniffed his way into the room. He stood by the bed. He looked at me. There I was in the fetal position like this, a real wretch. And in his best Charles Boyer kind of voice. Are you old enough to remember Charles Boyer? Tells me something about the median age of the audience here. So he looks at me and he says, "Oh, you temptress, you."
he was a survivor of the Holocaust. He said, when you've already lived the worst day of your life, everything else from that point isn't as difficult. So for the person who may be out in the audience and presently undergoing a drug addiction, it may seem like climbing Mount Everest or Mount Kilimanjaro or climbing this unbelievable mountain. And no, it's not easy, but yes, it can be done, and yes, you can do it.
I was 4 months away from being dead from multiple addictions, couldn't walk up a flight of stairs, hadn't slept outside in 27 years, had lived more than one worst day of my life. And like Vinny, he and I have talked about this. And mountains for me were not a way to get into recovery. I had to get sober first. But they were a way back to life, a way to learn what joy was like again, and a way to begin to offer people the fact that the worst day of their lives don't have to be as bad as the worst day of our lives were.
Very interesting and enlightening experience to negotiate with the Soviets. You learn very quickly that they don't give anything away. They don't make any unilateral concessions. And should we make unilateral concessions to them, they would accept them and say, all right, now what else do you want
now
to give
what
me?
else do you want to give?
And so it's a hard bargaining session.
During the time when Senator or Ambassador Tower was there and leading our START talks, it was my job to find creative ways to say no in those hard-nosed negotiations he's talking about, because the price the Russians wanted to extract was Reagan's SDI program. And that's what broke their back, fundamentally. Reykjavik was a turning point. Marshal Akrameyev, who was Gorbachev's principal advisor, told Vernon Waters it was a, I think he called it a watershed event, because they realized that Reagan was not going to give on this, and they knew that they could not compete. Gorbachev went home, wrote Perestroika, and as they say, the rest is history.
The global average temperature has been going up in this century. It's gone up about 0.6 centigrade, which is about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it has resulted in perceptible changes. For example, all over the world, glaciers have been receding. They're a kind of a long-term natural thermometer.
Who wants to write that letter to the powers that will be, saying, you know, dear Mr. President, we're sorry, but we really overestimated how much it was going to warm, and we didn't emphasize that it would primarily warm up the most obnoxious air masses on the planet. Now this is coming out, you know, we're sorry. Who wants to write that? No, what we're going to do is we're going to do the best we can to try and find some reason to explain the now acknowledged lack of warming.
I'm saying, and I'm hoping you would agree, we should do exactly the same thing with public grazing rights. We should do exactly the same thing with public mining rights, which right now are completely under market valued. You would agree, as a free marketer, we should open this up to the pressures of the market.
Well, yes, I agree. And the way, how do we do that? Do we do it by government fiat, or we do it by privatization? I think the argument is...
How do you privatize public lands? Those are public resources. Look, you're going to give it away?
Not give it away. Let's sell those lands as you would like to say us do. Put them out for auction.
You're going to sell your children's and grandchildren's legacy? Our environmental legacy in this country?
I want my children to have a chance to control the lands that are now political footballs. For the last 100 years in America...
We've never controlled those lands.
For the last 100 years, we've been going through...
It is obvious to me that I've lost control of this program, but the two of you...
What government is a different way of getting services you need anyway. You can have services, you can get yourself to work by your own devices, automobile or foot. You can get yourself to work by those things supplied by a private company, or you can get yourself to work those things supplied by government. And obviously where people come down politically hinges on whether they think government can do a better job or a worse job than private sector. I would say, given the size government we have now, government is relatively lean.
You realize there is a national attitude about the current tax code. Frankly, the American people are fed up with it. They insist that it be replaced with something. At this time, I think there are basically two competing ideas. One is a national sales tax, which is advanced by people who call themselves Citizens for Alternative Tax System. and the other is the flat tax. The current tax system must go, and a pretty clear predilection, I think, that it will be replaced by one of these two options.
When I was sitting in Luby's cafeteria on a bright sunny day, it wasn't in a dark alley, it wasn't at a dark bus stop at 4 o'clock in the morning. When that man drove his truck through the window, he completely had the upper hand, and he had the upper hand for a good 20 minutes. There is nobody here in this audience that can tell me that I don't have the right to protect myself and my family.
One man at Luby's had a gun. That was what was outrageous. No amount of other guns could ever have solved that problem. My wife is a rape victim too. Had she had a gun, I would not have a wife today.
We made a mistake. We underestimated the amount of control that David Koresh had on those people. He listened to the first part of what I had to say. He said, "You're going to put tear gas in here?" I said, "Yes, but we're not coming in." He hung up the phone, threw it out the window, which is a clue as far as ongoing negotiations. And we had a microphone that had been inserted the evening before into that compound. It was right in the vicinity of the front door kitchen area. He's heard to turn around immediately, say, "Get your masks on, they're putting gas in here." Shortly after that, within minutes, within a couple of minutes, an individual that I believe has been identified by Davidians that came out is clearly and distinctly heard on the enhanced tapes to say, "Spread the fuel."
That's just not true. And the reason I know it's just not true is because I heard those tapes with my own ears, as did those 12 jurors in San Antonio.
Now, when you focus on what colleges are doing, you just allow the continuation of the destruction by the public school system to continue, and you will need affirmative action and a system of preferences in perpetuity in order for black students to be admitted to colleges. They will never, ever be admitted on merit as long as we allow the schools to continue doing what they're doing.
Okay, Dr. Jennifer, would you respond to that?
I don't agree with that at all. I think the point that is being made here is that there are instances where young people have been admitted to college, and surely in many cases, or cases that he is perhaps very familiar with, there are some circumstances in which they should not have been, and they have not performed well. But I think to take that and to expand it to say, therefore, we should not admit minority students who do not project at the time of admittance the same kind of credentials that white Americans do, it would say that we're going to have a segregated society forever.
I've had the opportunity to interview thousands of talented experts, and many of these people, like all of us at the Foundation for Responsible Television, are truly trying to make a positive difference in the world. And many of you have come up to me on the street or called or emailed saying how much you enjoyed this or that program. Here's a short clip of Bill Moyers sharing the ultimate power of television to change people's lives.
So she said, "I came to New York 8 years ago. I wanted to be an actress. I burned to be an actress." She said, "I came, I trained, I went to all the auditions. The parts always seemed to be fugitive. They went to someone else. I couldn't get a really good part. I had a couple of minor roles and an understudy role once, but nothing ever happened. I fell in love with a man. We lived together for a while. He left me, married another woman within 2 weeks after leaving me. 3 weeks after he left me, my father died. I'm broke. I was broke. I wait tables like so many other young people in New York in order to make ends meet, and I just had enough. One night I came home, that's my apartment right over there, she said. One night I came home and it was enough. And I pulled the window down, lowered the shade, poured a stiff glass of bourbon, turned on the oven, the gas stove in my one-room apartment, and lay down on the couch. And she was really prepared for the curtain to fall, the last curtain. And she said, "But I made a mistake. I left my television set on. It had been on all day, actually, all night. And I'd left early that morning, and I heard a familiar voice, yours. I recognize your voice, and I heard you talking to somebody who was talking about the experience of being alive, the rapture or ecstasy of the moment, the importance of living life now." And she said, "It was very interesting. I heard the announcer say, 'Tune in next week and we'll continue the conversation with Joseph Campbell.'" So she said, "You know, I was curious. I was interested. I got up, I turned off the gas, I poured out the bourbon, I lifted the window and the shade and waited." And she said, "You know, it was," and then I watched the rest of the series, and she said, "What I've realized is I don't have to be an actress, but I really want to experience my life.
Thank you for watching, because as always, we've been talking about things that matter with people who care.
One in five.